Hello, and welcome into the Ringerverse, your Nexus feed for all things fandom. I'm your friend Ben Lindbergh, host of Button Mash and Ringerverse Recommends MC. And hey, long time no talk, at least here at Ringerverse Recommends, because we missed a month. You did not imagine it. You did not miss an episode. We missed an episode. Our apologies. There were scheduling complications. There were health complications. Comic-Con got in the way. We couldn't make the July episode happen. But we're back, and hopefully better than ever. I'm outside the city. I'm not in my natural habitat, but every now and then, even I need some pretty pastoral scenery. So hopefully that'll be a treat for you. Perhaps you can hear the crickets. It will be so soothing. But I'm losing the light, just like in that episode of The Studio. So I'll make this quick. We took some time to think about what we want to do with Ringerverse Recommends while we were taking our sabbatical, and we've decided to retool just a tad. We are debuting a different format this month. Much of it will be the same. We will still give you the same recommendations and clips you know and love from your friendly Ringerverse hosts. However, we have decided to do a centerpiece recommendation in each month's episode from here on out. Because although we've loved doing Ringerverse Recommends, and it seems like a lot of you enjoy it as well, it's been missing something. There's been great participation, but a lack of interaction, just because of the way we do these things. We each submit our clips. We're talking to you, but not to each other. And we thought maybe we could incorporate some conversation, some interaction. So each month, I will be having a more extended conversation with someone else, maybe one of the other Ringerverse hosts, maybe a friend of the Ringerverse who will be joining me to spotlight something, to talk about something at greater length that we like. Not as deep a dive as we would do on a full episode, but a lot longer and richer than we can in a couple-minute clip. So this month, we will be centering and focusing on Foundation, specifically Foundation Season 3. And I will be joined in just a moment by Rany Jazayerli, who's an old pal of mine and Mallory, going back to our Grantland days or even earlier. You might remember Rany from his contributions to Grantland and The Ringer, mostly on the sports side and the baseball side specifically. Like me, that's how I got my start too. But at some point, we have to branch out to pop culture coverage. And Rany is joining me to talk about a great streaming sci-fi series on Apple TV+. So we'll do that. And then we'll kick it to the clips and the recommendations, and I'll be back to transition us to that, and then I'll return at the end of the episode to recap the picks and deliver the listener recommendation as usual, and maybe give you a glimpse of Grumpkin, because it wouldn't be Ringerverse Recommends without my loyal dear Dachshund showing up at some point. Another slight change. No more trailers, because we want to keep these under a certain length, and with the longer front-loaded conversation, we're going to cut out the trailers. Sorry to some of you, you're welcome to others. So I will not be doing my community theater attempted DIY trailers anymore, at least for now. I'll miss them. I enjoyed them. I'm glad some of you enjoyed them as well. Maybe we'll bring them back at some point, but we want to keep this a bit snappier and more streamlined later in the episode. So we might as well get to it. I will tell you, even though we missed a month, I will tell you what I would have recommended last month, just because it would be a tragedy if you never knew. And of course, I would have recommended Dexter Resurrection. But you probably know that. You know I'm a Dex head already, because I recommended Dexter Original Sin earlier this year. Anything Dexter, I will watch and probably enjoy. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Rany. We're going to talk about Foundation, and then I'll be back, not with the full complement of Ringerverse hosts this month. We have a slightly smaller crew, but still some great clips, some great recommendations. I'm excited about this new format. Please let us know what you think, and I hope you'll check out this conversation about Foundation. Well, it's time to open the vault and talk to a doctor. Not a doctor of psychohistory, but a doctor of dermatology. His name is Rany Jazayerli, and his nemesis is not the mule, but the mole. He forecasts the future to try to stop those moles from becoming cancerous and to try to shorten the time between Kansas City sports titles once the Chiefs dynasty finally falls. In a former life, he was a sabermetrician, which is sort of like a psychohistorian, but for baseball. He was one of the founders of Baseball Prospectus, where I worked as well. And like me, he has written for Grantland and The Ringer. So we are sort of the same person, except that Rany grew up and got a real respectable job while I stay in my arrested adolescence. One of the things we have in common is an affection for Foundation, the Isaac Asimov books, and the Apple TV Plus streaming series, which we are here to talk about today. Rany, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm very nervous to talk to you about a subject other than sports for the first time.
This isn't far from your wheelhouse either. Sci-fi. That's a specialty of yours. Maybe not quite 1980s and 90s Kansas City Royals, but second best maybe. And we have corresponded about Foundation for years via email, via DMs. So we're taking it public here. People can actually follow along with our musings about the series. And since this is Ringerverse Recommends, we can't assume our audience has seen Foundation. Shame on those of you who haven't. No, we won't shame you. We will just encourage you to join us. So we'll start with some big picture thoughts on the series, and then we can talk a bit about the current season, but steer clear of spoilers, because we hope that some of you who aren't already part of the Foundation family will take our recommendation and catch up. So Asimov writes these short stories, novellas, novels, mostly in the 1940s and 50s, about the distant future of humanity. There's a galactic empire that's believed to be eternal and impregnable, but a brilliant mathematician, the Bill James of this far future, named Harry Seldon, uses the science of psychohistory to predict that the empire is actually on the verge of collapse. So he sets up a foundation that he hopes will shorten the dark ages after the fall and rebuild civilization. So this series, this story takes place over centuries, maybe millennia, lots of characters, many moving parts. Asimov wrote some sequels decades later. The whole saga is influential. It's considered a classic. It's beloved, but it's also considered unfilmable, essentially, untranslatable to the screen. And people tried and people failed. And along comes David S. Goyer, who is famous for his work on the Dark Knight trilogy and other superhero nerd culture stuff. And he comes out with this bold plan. He's going to make a streaming series for Apple. It's going to be 80 episodes, 8 seasons, this sweeping, magnificent story, which premiered in 2021. And now we're 8 episodes into the 3rd season with 2 episodes to go. As I recall, you were somewhat skeptical when this was announced, as was I, as was just about everyone. Can they actually make this thing? So why were you worried, and what has assuaged your concerns?
So the reason I was worried was that I don't think it is hyperbole to say that this might be the most ambitious attempt to translate a book from print to the screen that's ever been attempted. I mean, this is a galactic space opera that takes place over 1,000 years. It's such a big story. Isaac Asimov never finished it. I mean, that's one thing we have to remember. I mean, his final book, I think we were only about halfway through the 1,000-year, the 1,000-year interregnum that Harry Seldon predicted through psychohistory would take for a new empire to emerge that spanned the galaxy. The scale of it, I mean, it's essentially one novella after another, right? So it's one vignette. So the idea of filming it, not only are you talking about dozens of different planets, you're talking about new characters every 4 or 5 chapters. I mean, there's hundreds, if not 1,000 characters in the books that you would have to bring to life. When I read the books in the mid 80s and early 90s, you would occasionally hear rumors of like a movie potentially being adapted, and I mean, I thought that was an absolutely horrible idea. I mean, maybe it's because I had just seen the movie adaptation of Dune, the David Lynch, which valiant effort, but to try and condense any kind of enormous sci-fi story into even 3 hours just seemed absurd.
And people said the same thing about A Song of Ice and Fire and Dune, and Wheel of Time and other series and things that have been adapted in recent years. I wrote a piece at the end of 2021 about how it was just the end of unfilmable, that everything that was supposedly impossible to translate now is being translated with varying degrees of success. But Foundation, I don't want to say it makes A Song of Ice and Fire seem simple, but in terms of just the scope of it, it is perhaps not just comparable, but also exceeds it. I mean, certainly temporally, right, in terms of time, it's way surpasses anything that George R. R. Martin has managed, probably, unless you go back to the early prehistory stuff that he's written. And I guess a common theme is not finishing a series, right?
Exactly.
So that makes it difficult to make a good adaptation, as we learned in the later seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So the thing about Foundation that first made me think it could be done was simply the idea that it was being made by Apple in the era of prestige television. Like I was so thankful that we, after hearing about a potential adaptation in the early '90s, it took literally 30 years for it to come to fruition. And by the time we knew it was filming, I'm thinking to myself, it could work. Like, you have $1 trillion market cap corporation behind it, and they're going to let the story breathe, right? For potentially about 10 hours just for essentially the first book. I thought it was possible, but the other issue with the story was that, like you said, the temporal aspect of it, hundreds of years, and you would have to change actors every couple of episodes. That can be done. I mean, they did that with the first season of the new
House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon, exactly.
And everyone loved it. Yeah,
exactly. But it has problems. So we started to hear what some of the changes would be, and the first thing that really caught my attention is, oh, this could actually work. Was the idea of the clone emperors, Cleon. So in the book, Cleon is the emperor during the lifetime of Harry Seldon, but new emperors come along in each chapter, basically. I mean, the story was supposed to be an allegory for the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, Isaac Asimov famously got the idea for the story. I think he was waiting to meet with John Campbell, who's famous famous at the Ringer for his hero's journey work, but was the editor of the Sci-Fi magazine. And while waiting to meet with John Campbell, he happened to peruse Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and that's where this idea came to him. But different emperors, different leaders of Foundation in each chapter. So, but the idea of changing it to a genetic dynasty where the original emperor Cleon created clones of himself, and when one would die, then another one would be born to take their place, and having three emperors at the same time, just from a pure casting perspective, I just thought that was brilliant because they cast Lee Pace as the primary emperor, right? Day, and I mean, and then Jared Harris as Harry Seldon. We heard that they had kind of solved that problem of there will always be the same actors representing the emperors, which is a central part of the story. And then, I mean, Jared Harris and Lee Pace, I'm like, well, this is not going to suffer from an acting perspective, and it certainly hasn't. So that got me interested, certainly, that this might actually work.
Yeah, anytime you put Jared Harris in a sci-fi series, it bodes well. Could be correlation, but I think it's partly causation. So they came up with this really clever way of maintaining continuity, because the books are really about ideas more so than characters, character development, dialogue, not Asimov's strong suits exactly. So it's more thought-provoking, and it's something that would be difficult for viewers to follow on screen if you're constantly, I mean, if you thought the time jumps in House of the Dragon were rough, then brace yourself for Foundation. But they came up with this clever solution, which is that you have Lee Pace and his colleagues, Dawn and Dusk, the younger and older Cleons, who are constant. So it's different Cleons each time we jump forward, but same actor. And then Jared Harris as Harry Seldon. They've come up with ways to keep him in the mix via holograms, via other convoluted story solutions. Then there's Lou LaBelle as Gail Dornick, who is a time traveler essentially in cryosleep. And so that character can be a constant. And then you have Laura Byrne as Demerzel, maybe my favorite character of the series, who is an android, who is a robot, and has been alive for thousands of years, and thus spans this whole series too. So every season, you take a significant time jump, and that can be disorienting, but there are at least some constants. And then you get to, it's almost like a time lapse photography sort of vision of the future. You see how the plan proceeds, but you follow it through these familiar faces, at least. And that gives you something to hold on to. Although I think, and it's both a bug and a feature, I guess, that often the seasons take some time to find their footing.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they have leaped forward so far that they lose their balance a bit. And you have to get your bearings. And then typically, at least in the past couple seasons, they've really ramped up and hit their stride, maybe halfway through, maybe a little longer than that even, and then finish very strong. But there is just that initial disorientation that you have to acclimate to.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a Deus ex machina in terms of having Harry Seldon and Gail Dornick kind of stick around. Like sometimes
Yeah.
you can sort of see where they had to make concessions for casting purposes. That the plot, it does stretch the plot a little bit, but you understand why, because this would have been impossible otherwise.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really think we need to emphasize the quality of the casting and acting in this show really is phenomenal. I mean,
Mhm.
if you are an incredible stage actor who speaks English, there's a good chance that your agent has gotten a call to be on the show because I mean the diversity of the cast in every way, shape, and form is incredible, and everybody is so good. I mean, I think Lou Lobel's from she's New Zealand, I believe she's from. Laura Byrne, who might if anybody deserves an Emmy on the show, I think it's her, and she's
Yes.
Finnish. I've never
Mhm.
had seen her before, and she's. I think if I saw her acting like a human, like on down the street, I think it would totally freak me out at this point because she just embodies like the robotic personality. She never breaks character. It's really an impressive feat of acting. And
Although this season especially has explored her quote unquote humanity or her conflict and free will versus programming and what it would mean for her if this dynasty were to fall. Would she then be free to pursue her own aims? And that's one of those cases where it's sort of a universal theme and struggle and something everyone wrestles with, but here we're doing it through a far future robot, and it's even more poignant in a way. And just the relationship that the Cleons have with each other, knowing that their days are numbered and knowing exactly what the number of their days is, because they have this ceremony, the Ascension,
Mhm.
where the Dusk Cleon is essentially vaporized and a new Don Cleon comes along. And so they're reckoning with being clones and the unnatural existence that they lead and their relationship with Demerzel, who is sort of a mother to them and sometimes a lover. And there's some Game of Thrones in here in more than one way, and also kind of a tyrant, but a confidant. And so they have this push and pull, on again, off again dynamic with her. And we get to see Lee Pace, even though he's always playing Brother Day, very different days depending on the season and the era. And this season especially, he is thriving. Just the wardrobe choices. He's leaving it all on the field
He is
this
chewing
season.
some scenery in
Yeah.
the best possible way. And I mean, I have to think that it's such a fun, job as an actor to get to play because, like you said, they're playing a clone, but each clone, as we learn in early on, has a somewhat different personality. So they're playing a completely different character each season, even though they're exactly the same person on the outside.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, but him, Terrence Mann, Cassian Bilton, who this is like his first major acting role playing Brother Don. Um, the interaction, the chemistry between the three, because of course they are essentially they call each other brothers, and they're essentially clones of each other. It works really really well, and
Hmm.
it's interesting because some of the plots are taken directly from Asimov's stories. Obviously, the mule is the the classic, the most famous of his stories, and that's what they're exploring this season. And some of it they're making up on the fly. And but I think for somebody who's coming new to the show, I think it will be difficult for you to figure out what's new and what's adapted because um, it feels like a very cohesive plot. One thing about the show that really surprised me is how little it panders to the audience in the sense of like it doesn't explain everything. It
Hmm.
doesn't. This is not a show that is appealing to the lowest common denominator. Like you might have to watch an episode twice to really understand what's going on, but it doesn't insult the audience at all. It's really like it's so nice to see when we talk about prestige TV, like prestige in the sense of it's intellectually really, it's almost too stimulating. Like sometimes I'll finish an episode, I'm like, what just happened? And I need to go back and figure it out. But I enjoy it. It's not a puzzle show in the sense of, there's some sort of like big twist or big reveal.
Hmm.
Well, not necessarily. There might be, but the point
Yes.
is just like it deals in such weighty topics as religion and free will, and this idea of, I mean, from the books, the idea of psychohistory. If you can predict the future, does that mean that we all are predestined to our paths? And the tension between being able to predict the future of billions or trillions of humans, but individual humans are completely unpredictable. And I know
Hmm.
from the books, Asimov would compare that to the laws of thermodynamics, where
Hmm.
any individual gas molecule, you have no idea what's going on. But we have laws of thermodynamics that can say a gas in a contained space that contains trillions or quadrillions of molecules, we can predict exactly what will happen.
Yeah.
And taking that to humans, but like those are the weighty, ideas the story, looks into, and there aren't a lot of shows that have tried that at this scale before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ideal for me because the books meant a lot to me when I read them. I read them in high school and I just consumed the whole saga and all the other related stories and books in Asimov's universe and all the robot stories. But that was so long ago and I haven't done a full reread. So I retain that fondness for them and I remember the broad strokes, but I forget some of the details. And so it's not as if I necessarily know what's going to happen next. And also they've changed things in significant ways. So it's not always one to one. And I also don't feel too precious about changes. When they mix something up, I'm not saying, oh, this is different from the book and therefore inferior. In other ways, I think it's superior and necessary to make it work on screen. And it's not just well acted, but so well produced and well shot. It's just so opulent and
Mhm.
lavish. I
It's
mean,
gorgeous. It's
it's
absolutely gorgeous, and in
it
ways you've
is.
never seen before. Like, is it Synax? Is that the water planet that Gail Dornick is from?
Yeah. Hmm.
Where it's an ocean planet, and then in the sky, it's got like rings, like with the rings of Saturn surrounding
It's
the planet. They
yeah,
never they never reference it at all. It's just kind of there in the background, and it's
yeah.
just an absolutely stunning background that is just like one scene among like 100 different planets that you see in the show.
Right, just throw away things that I can't imagine how much they cost or how much effort went into them, but you never get the sense that they're cutting corners. It's almost Avatar-esque in
Mhm.
just its fully realized visions of these exotic alien worlds and just the sets and the wardrobes. It just seems like no expense was spared. And I wanted to wear something from Lee Pace's wardrobe this season, but I didn't think I could pull it off. First of all, he doesn't wear very much in
No.
some episodes, which is another selling point for many viewers. Also, this season, he's coming out there with bathrobes and sandals and undershirts and shorts, but I don't think I could pull it off the way that Lee Pace did, so I haven't tried. But yeah, it's a beautiful series, and I've written about recently how a lot of sci-fi now it's just sort of an homage to the 70s because you have something like Andor or Alien Earth or Blade Runner 2049, these things that are following those formative, the original Star Wars and Alien and Blade Runner. And so they look like that. They're sort of frozen in time. And those are great series and movies, and I welcome that. But Foundation looks like its own thing. And just every shot of a spacecraft, approaching a planet, or it's beautiful. It's almost, I guess, 2001, A Space Odyssey, sort of, just in its like
Right.
majestic.
Plus 60 years of CGI and
Exactly.
special
Right.
effects. Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of
And
appropriate because like you mentioned the 70s, but like we know that George Lucas with Star Wars, I mean, Foundation was an inspiration
oh,
for
yeah.
a lot of Star Wars. I mean,
Just like Dune.
Coruscant, right?
Yeah.
Coruscant, which is, like a planet spanning metropolis. He lifted that directly from Trantor. The Trantor that
Yeah.
you see in this show, if it looks kind of like a Star Wars derivative, no, it's the other way around. This is Star
Hmm.
Wars took the idea from here. Hyperspace, right?
Hmm.
Asimov has said, I mean, all sci-fi writers had to come up with some sort of conceit
Sure.
to allow for faster than light travel, but essentially, hyperspace was invented, the idea by Asimov, and that's how they travel. And in the very first episode, I mean, I remember literally having because the anticipation for this show for me, it was like, please don't suck. Please don't suck. Whatever you do, please don't suck. And, 20 minutes in, there is that first moment where ship goes into hyperspace. And I think David S. Goyer has talked about like how they had to like almost get permission from Apple to spend like extra amounts of money for
Yeah.
that first, because they wanted that first, you know, scene of like, this is space, this is outer space to look majestic. It blew my mind. I had to pause. I had to pause the show for a moment because it just hit me. I'm like, oh my god, this could actually be good. And it was almost too much for me after all these years of anticipation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a gorgeously shot show.
Yeah. That's almost my concern. That's one of the things that I love about the series. And yet that's what makes me worried that it won't come to fruition, that it costs too much. It's too ambitious because Goyer came out with this plan. It's going to be 80 episodes. We're going to tell the whole story, the whole sweep and scope of history. Well, this was developed in 2017, ordered in 2018, premiered in 2021. This was a very different time for prestige TV, for streaming series. Even Apple, which has been the most free spending of the companies and willing to burn millions or billions of dollars on these series, much to my benefit, because I've enjoyed
Mhm.
many of them, but it doesn't always translate to popularity ratings. And Foundation has an audience, but it's not a breakout hit. It's not a mainstream sensation. And so that makes me worried, just because even Apple has pulled back a bit on the spending. And that has affected Foundation directly because Goyer, who was the architect of this whole series, there was a bit of a dispute before this season, a conflict over budget. And Goyer has stepped down as showrunner. He's still very involved in the series. He's still written a lot of episodes this season, but he's no longer the showrunner. And that came after presumably the budget was slashed, though it's hard to tell on the screen. It doesn't look a lot cheaper than it ever did. But behind the scenes, there's been some conflict about that. It took a while, at least for season 3, the renewal to be announced. Season 4 has not been greenlit yet, as far as we know. And so I can't help but fret, as much as we like this series and as good as it is, and as many fans as it has, that it might be heading for a similar fate as the novels and the series, and perhaps this too will be unfinished. And so that scares me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as much as, I was worried about the budget being cut, like you said, I've been looking for signs of like, the seam showing and, maybe the special effect, maybe the CGI is a little off, but I don't feel it. And
Yeah.
look, if lowering the cost of lowering the budget keeps the show on the air, I'm all for that trade-off. Um, I was it was touch and go as to whether we get season 3, as you know, and like
Mhm.
especially because we knew they'd set it up so that the mule would be season 3. I'm just so grateful we are at least getting this this season on screen. Um, but right now I'm operating under the assumption we may not get a season 4. And sometimes shows do best when like every season could be its last, and there's almost like a sense of urgency that goes with it. But
Mhm.
I'm trying to be glass half full here and say, even if we don't get another season, even if this is it, and we have 2 more episodes left, the fact that we got this is still a monumental achievement that I just never expected I would see on the screen. let alone of this high a quality. But I would strangle a small puppy if that's what it would take. Game of Thrones style here now. If that's what it would take to to ensure the full 8 season arc, or even like 2 or 3 more, enough to at least get through some of the stories that Asimov told in the books, and maybe explore a little bit beyond. Where those went, and get to kind of some sort of conclusion about like the end of Empire. Because in the books, Empire does eventually end, and it's
Mhm.
basically a foundation in a void that's left over, and they could explore that. I mean, there's still such fertile territory for someone to continue the stories. So I hope we hear soon that they are renewing for season 4. When you asked me to come on, one of the things I want to do is make sure we encourage as many people as possible to watch the show, because it really is worth continuing. And uh, I do feel like not enough people are aware that this show even exists, but everyone I've turned on to it has been, at the very least, impressed with it.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of admiration. I don't know how much of it is love, but definitely
Yeah.
people are happy that it exists.
Yeah. Hashtag save foundation. Yeah, it's not for everyone. I guess it can be slow paced at times. I find it very absorbing, but there's not always a ton of action necessarily. It's sort of cerebral. But yes, it will impress you, I think, right off the bat. I would say season 2 was an improvement over season 1, especially just the latter half of
Mhm.
season 2. That was just all bangers, basically
Episode
from episode.
9 of
Oh,
season 2, I think, for my money, it's the greatest episode of science fiction television I have ever seen.
wow.
I mean,
Okay.
I just, there's like almost like two simul. You get a combination of like incredible reveals, a backstory at the beginning of the episode, and by the end, there's a twist that we didn't have in the books.
Mhm.
That I'm sure you were as like, did that is that actually happening? Did you have that kind of reaction as I did? But it made sense within the confines of the plot, where they were taking the story. And again, gorgeously shot, and the special effects were I'm sure extremely expensive. It went where no other show I think has ever gone, at least from the sci-fi level.
Yeah.
So if you start it and you feel like it's a slow burn at the beginning, get to the end of season 2, because like around the middle of season 2, it really does take a turn for the better, I think.
Yeah, and that was a tough act to follow. And season 3 has been strong. I would say it's not maintaining that level of the last couple episodes of season 2, but we do have 2 more episodes to go. So pull out your prime radiant here, and we won't get too granular or spoilery. But this season as a whole, it has centered this conflict between Gale and Harry and the Mule, who is this mutant who can control minds and persuade people to not just do his bidding, but love him against their will, essentially. And so he basically breaks psychohistory, or that's the fear, at least, that he is the exception to the rule that you can predict, people in large numbers, but individuals can't affect the course of history. He is something that even Selden hadn't planned for initially. And so they've been building up this conflict now almost essentially from the beginning of the series, and for hundreds of years in the in-universe timeline, this showdown that we've seen teases of, visions of, since before this season started. And now it's all kind of coming to a head. The Mule, another Game of Thrones comp played by the actor who played Euron
Mhm.
Greyjoy. So he's doing some scenery chewing of his own. This is a little bit different from previous seasons in that the nemesis is not just the inevitable decline of civilization and entropy, but this villain, this big bad, basically, who can bend people to their will. So it's a little bit of a different look for the series. There is a potential twist that perhaps book readers have identified here. We don't know whether that will happen. They've kind of been cagey about whether it will happen, and so we won't spoil anything there. But how has this conflict worked for you this season as a whole, and are your hopes high for the final 2 episodes?
My hopes are high. I am a little bit nervous, but um, I if they are taking this in the direction that I hope that they, and even before the season, you and I had a discussion, and I had a theory as to how they were playing this. If they go in that direction, I think it will be absolutely brilliantly put together. What because what frustrated me from the first two seasons was that they tipped their hand so early, about the existence of the mule with these sort of premonitions that Gail Dornick was having, as well as the existence of the second foundation, which in the book was both of those things were not addressed at all in the first, I think, book or book and a half of Asimov's stories, in part because I don't think he had come up with the idea for the second foundation. And he kind of, kind of retconned it halfway through writing this.
And it's different because the early seasons, it's far future and it's technology that's indistinguishable from magic, but it's grounded in science. Whereas now it's this challenge to the science of psychohistory is mentalics and empaths and people who have seemingly supernatural abilities. So that was something that Game of Thrones was always at war with itself. Is it going to be just straight up fantasy, or is there going to be magic? And often the adapters at least would shy away from that aspect of things, much to the dismay of the people who hosted the podcast, whose shirt you are wearing right now, our friends Mallory and Jason. So this is a little more not just sci-fi, but also a little supernatural, right? Which is a different aspect to the series that they've been setting up for some time.
Right. But when they sort of previewed the existence of the mule, I have to be careful here not to reveal anything, but it struck a sour note with me because I felt like they were playing their hand too soon. But I wonder now if they knew exactly what they were doing, and essentially they were running a 3-season con on all of us. I think as somebody who's like, if you've read the stories, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, then you have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's fine. But we'll find out in the next 2 weeks. I'm very curious to see how they play this. They've definitely left their tea leaves. There was certainly one conversation, one piece of dialogue in the middle of season 3 that I think at the end of the season, anybody, even if you've never read the books and had no idea, if you go back and watch that conversation, it's hiding in plain sight. So I think they're setting us up for what I think will be an incredible twist. But I'm not certain. And I really hope I'm right.
Well, selfishly, we want this series to continue. So please go watch it. Take us at our words. If you haven't tried the series already, then please do. There is a lot to recommend it, as we just did. So we didn't talk about the Kansas City Royals. We talked about some Royals, at least. We covered a lot of ground here. We could probably discuss this series for hours more, but hopefully we'll have another opportunity to, if there is not a third Selden crisis, if this series is not canceled, and if we get a season 4. So thank you, Rany. This was a joy.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, it's Ben back again. I have moved to yet another location. We're switching up the scenery on this episode. I'm rejoined by my trusty dachshund, Grumpkin. Thanks for listening to the Foundation discussion, if you did. And we've got much more for you. More recommendations to come. I'm just here to tee them up. Let's roll the clips.
Hey, this is Daniel Shin, and this month I am recommending Zach Cregger's latest horror movie, Weapons. Now, if you haven't seen this movie yet, I will not give away too many details in this recommendation because I do not want to spoil it for you. I think this is a movie that you're going to want to go in fresh. It takes many unexpected twists and turns, has a very chaotic energy to it. But the basic premise of it is 17 children from the same third grade class in Maybrook, Pennsylvania, all run away on the same night at the exact same time. And the movie investigates the mystery of what's happened to them. You might have seen these kids doing this eerie Naruto-style run in the middle of the night in trailers or on billboards. I'm really hoping that Ben has reenacted this for the video. I will be finding out when you guys do. But the movie has a great cast that includes Josh Brolin, Julia Garner, Benedict Wong, and many others. And much like Cregger's previous film, Barbarian, it's definitely a scary movie, but it's also really funny. Cregger has a background in comedy, And it shows in this film, in both of his films, but especially in Weapons. There is such a natural relationship between horror and comedy where the genres can really feed off of each other when done right, with the tension that builds up from these moments of terrifying suspense and the release that comes from laughter and being able to derive humor out of these dramatic, absurd situations. Cregger has really already proven that he has mastered this as a filmmaker. And he's going to be a name that you're going to want to look out for in the years to come, especially in this nerd culture space that we cover here in the Ringerverse. Next year, he is coming out with a reboot of Resident Evil that he has written and directed, which sounds like the perfect combination to revitalize this beloved video game franchise on the big screen. He has also apparently written an original script set in the DCU called Henchmen, which, if that ever comes to fruition, could be a really interesting part of the reboot, the relaunch of the DCU. And he's going to be somebody you're going to want to look out for, and Weapons is a great place to start. The movie came out on August 8th, so I don't know how much longer it's going to be in theaters, but I do recommend that you try to catch it in theaters before it goes, because there really are few cinematic experiences quite like seeing horror movies like Weapons, where people they can't help themselves with the visceral reactions that they're having to the jump scares or just the sheer absurdity that Cregger has been able to show both in Barbarian and in Weapons. So I highly recommend going to see this in theaters. But yeah, go check out Weapons before it goes.
Hey, Ringerverse Recommends. Steve Allman here with your recommend for this month. I'm going to say that my recommendation is going to be one of my favorite video game genres, roguelikes. And my recommendation is going to be the Rogue Prince of Persia. They basically made one of the best underrated video game franchises into a roguelike. You play as the Prince of Persia, who is fighting a battle to save his city. And a great addition to this is if you've ever been playing Dead Cells or any of these other great action platforming roguelikes, you pick between 3 power-ups, you progress through a level, you have little power-ups along the way. It's really, really great, and the platforming is kind of sensational. Music is a banger, art style is really, really cool, and you've had hours and hours of fun with this. Along with all the other great games out there that came out this week, don't forget to check out Rogue Prince of Persia.
My Ringerverse recommends is an anime on Crunchyroll called Ruri Rocks. It is about a young girl and I believe a graduate student who's a geologist, and that sounds crazy because it is just a story of falling in love with geology and molten rocks and gold and everything that you find in rivers and mineral beds. And it sounds very boring, but it's very sweet. It's very wholesome. It is something that I like to watch every week when I just kind of need to calm down and zone out. And I've learned a lot about geology and rocks. So my Ringerverse recommends is Ruri Rocks, available on Crunchyroll.
What's up, Ringerverse Recommends? It's your boy, Jomi, and this month I'm recommending Don to Don Season Dose. Gigi's here. He's got powers too. Listen, the whole thing's popping off, and y'all know me. Y'all know I love my romance. And Momo and my guy Room, man, they make it happen. You see them when they touch their hands in the car? I was going crazy. So make sure you are locked in on one of the best animes of this season. I mean, listen, I want to recommend so much to y'all, but we just gonna start with that and Season 2. We gonna jump all the way into the deep end. Then we can see if y'all can handle my dress up darling or I can't even. Let's just stick to Don to Don Season 2 for now, because it's finna get crazy if I start going off. Make sure you're watching Dan and Dan Season 2. Lock in.
Hello, Ringerverse. It's Matt James, the deputy art lead here at The Ringer and frequent Button Mash guest. Happy belated National Dog Day to all who celebrate. This is my dog, Toro. He's a mini Aussie, which is a herding dog, which is why he's been enjoying watching me play my recommendation for this month, a game called Herdling, which is out now on PS5, Steam, and Xbox. It is free on Game Pass. And in Herdling, you play a shepherd who rescues and escorts wild beasts, kind of like this guy, but not quite as cute, obviously. Much like Sword of the Sea, a game that we went over on Button Mash this week, Herdling has no dialogue in it, but it still manages to tell a really moving story with amazing music and stunning environments. And it's really relaxing to play, and you can finish it in 1 or 2 sittings. And I was a bit concerned that, controlling this game would be difficult. Managing a herd as it gets to like 10 wild beasts would become unwieldy, but the controls are really great, and none of the animals are ever trying to break away or anything. So it's a pretty stress-free experience. I guess it's kind of like a walking simulator in some ways, but like a pro walking simulator. There's some engaging environmental design that really adds some depth to the experience. Now, Herdling has some subtle things to say about our relationship with nature and how the journey we're all on together is a bit brighter when we band together, right? Don't you think? So if you're too scared to go outside and touch grass, you can at least boot up Herdling and run around some fields with your best wild beast buds. And yes, if you're wondering, you can name all of them, and you can feed them, and you can pet them. Herdling, check it out.
All right, it's Ben back again, ready to bring this thing home. Grum has retired to her bed, as you can probably see at the edge of her frame, so I don't want to keep her up any longer. I am here to recap the recommendations you just heard, deliver a listener recommendation, and then bid you goodbye until next month. So, you heard me and Rany Jazayerli talk about Foundation Season 3, which you can and should stream on Apple TV+. Daniel Chin recommended the major motion picture Weapons, which I also co-sign. I saw it in theaters. You should too. Jomi was here to recommend Dan to Dan yet again. This is his second time recommending Dan to Dan. You got to take him up on it if you haven't already. Season 2 is out. And of course, Charles, the anime and manga master, true to form, picks a Crunchyroll show himself, Ruri Rocks. And then we had a couple of video game recommendations from Steve Allman, the Rogue Prince of Persia, and from Matt James, Herdling. Okay, so we accept, we solicit, we welcome monthly listener nominations for these episodes at ringerverserecommends@gmail.com. Please do keep them coming. And because I feel bad that we missed July and I don't want people's recommendations from last month to go to waste, and because we had fewer clips than usual at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you 3 listener recommendations, which we received for last month's show. But hey, they're evergreen. They're still good. They're still out there for you to enjoy. So I'm going to start with Anders, who writes, for the month of July, I'd like to recommend the series Nautilus on AMC+. A prequel series detailing the early days of Captain Nemo and the Nautilus. The show is structured very much like a Star Trek series, sold, with the crew coming across various beasts and villains each week, all the while trying to outrun the East India Company. The show has a decent comedic tone alongside its drama, with interesting characters and beautiful locations as the Nautilus makes it from island to island, overcoming both natural and engineering challenges in the quest for freedom and knowledge of the seas. I highly recommend Nautilus to anyone searching for some adventure and escapism. I'm intrigued. I still watch Walking Dead on AMC, as you all know. Daryl Dixon, about to be back yet again. Read plenty of Jules Verne in my day. Next recommendation comes from Tom Shapansky, who says, for the month of July, I would like to recommend 3 Shattered Souls, the final book in Broken Blades trilogy by May Corland. The series is very loosely inspired by Korean myth and tells the story of deadly people on a mission to kill the god King Jun. Their adventure sets them up on a path to discovering long-lost secrets, love, betrayal, and found family that culminates in them being the unlikely centerpiece of world events by the end of the trilogy. Beyond the story, the books also have beautiful artwork on the inside covers as well as on the pages themselves, making them a book you might want to have facing the wrong way on your shelf. If you are looking for a fast-paced fantasy series that you can now read in its entirety, I recommend the Broken Blades trilogy. Start with 5 Broken Blades, then 4 Ruined Realms, before culminating in the newly released 3 Shattered Souls. Finally, Pearson says, 15 years after the release of Season 1, Season 2 of the anime series Panty and Stocking, aka New Panty and Stocking, is finally here. New Panty and Stocking comes to us courtesy of Studio Trigger, recently the creators of the hit anime Cyberpunk Edgerunners and Delicious in Dungeon. After a shocking ending to Season 1, our angel sisters Panty and Stocking are back and continuing to behave badly and slay ghosts in Dayton City, all while parodying our favorite Western cartoons and media. Our no-nonsense Reverend Garterbelt and Ghost Hunter Brief are also back, along with Season 2 bringing us 2 new angel brothers, Polyester and Polyurethane. It has been another wild ride. Sounds like it. To those interested, it should be made clear, despite being an anime, this series leans into a lot of Adult Swim-type humor and language and has heavy Western influences. And being a parody of cartoons while using a Western art style, the original English dub is what makes the show a standout. Unfortunately, and you can blame Amazon here, the original English cast is no longer here for Season 2. I was a bit worried when I saw the first trailer, but these worries have been laid to rest, at least for me, as the new English dub is still fantastic. I'm more of a subs over dubs guy, but to each his own. New Panty and Stocking is as wacky as ever, fresh with modern references, and can be watched on Prime Video. Those who want to catch up on the 13 episodes of Season 1 can do so on Crunchyroll, though for those who want to jump into Season 2, Season 1 isn't necessarily required viewing. It's an episodic show for the most part, and Season 2 quickly catches you up on everything you need to know. Well, thank you again to Anders and Tom Stepanski and Pearson. Keep your recommendations coming for future months to ringerverserecommends@gmail.com. And that will do it for the August edition. We thank you, as always, for listening and participating. I thank you, Steve Allman, for producing this episode, as well as submitting a nomination for it, and to Arjuna Ramgopal for helping me brainstorm this new format and supporting the new revamped Ringerverse Recommends. Stay tuned for coverage on the Ringerverse House of R, of Peacemaker and Alien Earth, and a comics catch-up, and Hollow Knight Silksong and Borderlands 4 coming to Button Mash soon. So much to look forward to, and so much to look forward to in September as well. And we will be back next month to recommend much of it, anything that we can't cover in a full-length episode on the feed. We will hit here, and until then, I hope that you will recommend the Ringerverse.